What is the Zettelkasten method? How can you use it, and can it help you become a better writer? Hi there, my name is Brian Collins. Welcome to the Become a Writer Today show. Hope you enjoyed the content in this video where I'm going to walk through the Zettelkasten method. If you do, hit thumbs up. And if you want to get more writing advice or guides just like this, please subscribe to the channel. So the Zettelkasten method is a form of research that was invented by the German author and sociologist Niklas Luhmann. He was an incredibly productive guy. During the mid part of the 20th century, he wrote over 50 books and 600 articles. And that's a huge amount for a scientific writer. And he credits his prolific output to his research system, which is called the Zettelkasten Method. That's a German word, which roughly translates as slip box. It's a system for collecting, organizing, and interlinking your thoughts and ideas and then turning them into published works. Now, I've tried many different note-taking systems over the years. I've tried using index cards to build a type of commonplace book, which the author Ryan Holiday recommends. I've also tried Evernote, whereby I'd save articles into Evernote and then hopefully review them later on at some point. I've also tried just basic journaling. All of these methods have their place, but I've had the best results with the Zettelkasten method. Here's why. With the index card system or commonplace book, I found that I just wasn't using the commonplace book quite enough to get real value from it. And not only that, but it was quite difficult to find ideas when I needed them because it was reliant on index cards. With Evernote, I was simply clipping articles and ideas into Evernote. Wasn't really engaging with the materials, and it didn't mean much to me because it was just basically building a local version of the internet based on my part of the internet that I like to consume. And while journaling is a fantastic process for writers, sometimes you need a research system that you can use for your nonfiction articles and your books. The Zettelkasten method works like this. Read books as normal, highlight key passages and takeaways. Listen to podcasts, write down key takeaways and quotes from the podcast in your notes app of choice. Watch documentaries, complete courses, and so on. What you also want to do when you're taking notes or copying and pasting extracts from these interviews is include the original link or reference to the source material so you can find it later. Then at the following morning or at the end of the week or whenever is appropriate, you're going to read through all of your raw notes, all of the quotes and highlights that you've taken from books, and you're going to summarize the key idea in your own words. When you're doing this inside of your Zettelkasten, and I'll show you software that you can use in a moment for this, remember to have one idea per note within your Zettelkasten. So if I listen to a podcast interview about decision making, I may have taken 5 or 6 notes about decision making from the podcast and copied and pasted a few quotes from the podcast transcript. Well, each one of those would represent a single note within my Zettelkasten. You're also summarizing the note or the takeaway in your own words, but then you may potentially write a short reaction to the takeaway below it. So it's almost like you're having an ongoing conversation with yourself about a particular topic. When you've got a series of notes, you may give it a tag. Now I use hashtags for this, and I'll show you how I use hashtags in a moment. But you may also want to interlink each one of your notes so that you can quickly find everything that you've researched about a particular topic over time. Then later on, if you're going to write an article about, let's say, decision making, you'll go into your Zettelkasten and you will type in decision making or some of the relevant tags, and then all of your notes about decision making will come up. And your job then is to turn those notes into something that you're going to publish online. It's a fantastic system of research because it's something that you will do consistently and regularly, and it encourages going back to rereading old notes. And that for me is the key takeaway from using the Zettelkasten method, is the value lies in going back to old notes and updating them and seeing how they link with whatever you're researching or working on now. Now with that said, let's go over to the system that I use for the Zettelkasten method, and I'm going to explain how my process works, and then I'm going to give you some different options that you can use for your version of the Zettelkasten method. The app that I use for my personal Zettelkasten is called Day One. It's actually a dedicated journaling app. It's not built for the Zettelkasten method, but I use it because I journal regularly and I wanted to keep all of my journal entries and also my notes for my Zettelkasten in one place. I also like Day One because the app is easy to use and it has a mobile app so I can take notes on the go, and the desktop app is nice to write in. But I'll show you some other options later that you can use for your system. So you'll see here there's a number of journals along the sidebar. Not all of these are relevant to the Zettelkasten, so I won't hear about my personal journal, one about my business, meditations and dreams, also a training journal because I'm training for a marathon. But the ones I wanted to call out are Raw Notes, Zettelkasten, and TK. TK is where I put the notes that I described earlier on in this video. TK is an acronym that stands for to come. Basically, if I'm listening to a podcast interview and I think it's an interesting podcast, I will open up the Day One app, just type something in the header of the note, and then put the link so I can go back and find it later on. If I'm watching a YouTube video, sometimes I'll just screenshot the video and just take a few bullet point notes on my phone or with the desktop app if I'm doing something else, and I'll put that into TK. I'll also clip interesting articles and quotes from books and so on into TK. Then what I'll do is each morning or at the end of the week, I'll spend half an hour going through all of the entries in TK and turning these rough notes that don't make any sense except to me into something that's a bit more usable and thought through. And that brings me to the second journal, which is Zettelkasten, and I have approximately 2,000 entries, or 1923 at the time of recording this video. And I have entries about a range of different topics. So I've been thinking a lot about NFTs lately, so a lot of the newer entries are about NFTs. But let's say I'm writing an article about decision making. So what I'll do is I'll type in decision making, and then all of my entries about decision making will be surfaced. So here's the first entry that came up. It's a story about Beanie Babies as an example of collectibles that I came across on YouTube and how this relates to decision making. So what it is, I summarized the story that the YouTuber presented on YouTube in my own words, or mostly in my own words. And I also included the original link in case I needed to use this in a future article and I wanted to cite him correctly. And then what I'll also do is I'll give each note at least two tags so I can find them more easily. So I'm going to press Command T here to bring up the tags. So I've given it NFTs because this is about NFTs, this particular metaphor, and collectibles. And I think the reason why decision making came up is decisions is somewhere here in the text. What I'll also do then is turn the headline into something that makes sense at a glance. So because there's so many entries, I need to be able to understand what each note is about at a glance. So Beanie Babies as an example of collectibles. So that tells me that this is all about collectible examples that I could potentially use if I'm writing about NFTs. And then I can go ahead and read the rest of it and see if it makes sense. Now, I haven't done it for this one, but sometimes I will interlink notes. So you can see here there's an also see section. So this note here is from the excellent book about decision making by Annie Duke called How to Make Decisions. So I took a screenshot from the book. And again, it's worth pointing out that this is just for my own use, not for public use. And then I put several other notes related to this note on the also see section. And if I click on these, I can pull up these notes. And the idea is that I'm building a kind of personal knowledge management library, or kind of a personal internet of all the notes and research and ideas that I've come across in books. Now, there's kind of a few key principles which are Zettelkasten. Ideally, you have one idea per note. So this is probably quite long for a note. So looks like something I could turn into an article. But many of my notes, are simply a couple of sentences and may contain a quote like this. And then my thoughts on the quote, and then maybe a counterpoint, and then a link. Because if your note is getting quite long, it's usually a good idea to break it up into several different notes. So here's another example. I came across the concept of the ODA loop: observe, orientate, decide, act. I think I came across this online, and I've just summarized it in my own words, and then also put in some other relevant notes so I could potentially interlink these ideas. Now, I also like using hashtags because it encourages me to interlink seemingly unrelated notes. So this one here on banal everyday experiences is all about making decisions, but it's also about happiness, loss, and cognitive bias. And I have lots of notes about cognitive bias. So I'm just going to press Command T here so you can see these hashtags. So if I go up here and type in hashtag cognitive bias, I have 46 notes. So I'll just press X here. So hold on. So now you can see all my notes about cognitive bias. And the idea is that you're not necessarily working one specific topic. You're just constantly engaging with the materials that you're reading in your books, in videos and courses, summarizing them in your own words, pulling out interesting quotes, and then interlinking your notes. Now, I also have another part of my Zettelkasten, which I don't use quite as much, but it's something I want to do more of, called raw notes. So in the raw notes section, I will sometimes just paste transcripts of interviews, longer sections from books, my Kindle highlights, and so on. And I find this is helpful if I want it for search, basically. So, I mean, I can't really use these directly, but if I'm typing in decision making, it might bring up one of the raw notes, and that might encourage me to go back to the original source material and see if I've missed something. So this is something I want to do more of. Now, it's worth remembering that a key principle, or it's worth remembering that Niklas Luhmann wrote 50 books and 600 articles during his lifetime. So it's not enough to keep all of these notes and not do anything with them. Your job as a writer is to turn these notes that you're on ongoing conversations that you have with yourself into articles that you're going to publish on your site. And that brings me up to how I'm currently using the Zettelkasten. So many of my current notes are about NFTs, because I think NFTs are radically changing how writers and creators will engage with each other online. Whether you're interested in NFTs or not, it's something I've started to write about on my personal site. So I've started taking my notes about NFTs. So if I go here, these are all my NFT notes, and I've started turning them into articles that I publish here. So the idea is that you're listening to an interview about that, or the idea is that I'm listening to an interview or reading an article about NFTs, put it in here, then I move the note to here, summarize it in my own words, interlink it if relevant, and then I will go back and read through some of the notes and then potentially turn it into an article that I'll publish here. So it's basically a way of researching, organizing, and then writing that can be particularly helpful. And that brings me up to the other key takeaway. So I've tried a lot of different systems over the years for my Zettelkasten. I started with clipping notes into Evernote, and then I built an analog system using index cards. But the value of the Zettelkasten relies in reviewing your notes regularly. And because the Zettelkasten encourages you to interlink notes, because it encourages you to find seemingly unrelated ideas and connect them, it encourages you to go back to old notes and surfaces ideas that you've forgotten about. And you can also go back and update old notes if your thinking has changed, or add another note if you want to have an ongoing conversation. So that's how I'm using the Zettelkasten right now. Now, it's worth remembering that I use Day One simply because I use it for journaling. There are other apps that you can use, and I'm going to walk you through some resources that will help you. So Roam Research is a relatively new app that's built with personal knowledge management in mind. I don't use Roam Research myself, but I have tested it, and it'll automatically generate links between all of your notes for you. So it could save a lot of time, but there is a little bit of a learning curve. And to be honest, I'm not using it because they don't have the same level of apps and support that Day One has, at least not quite yet. Although I'm not using Roam Research because it's not quite as developed as Day One, but I may migrate to it at some future point. It's also a little bit more expensive than Day One from what I remember. The other app that might help you is Readwise. So if you read a lot of Kindle books, I would recommend using Readwise because it will surface quotes from your books on screen. Yeah, it will surface quote. The other app that I'd recommend you use is Readwise. This is more for extracting ideas from books that you've read previously. So basically, if you connect it to your Kindle account, it will surface quotes that you've highlighted on your phone, and then you can export them to your Zettelkasten later. So if I go to Daily Review and I click Start, I can see notes from a book I read a couple of years ago about negotiating. And if I like it, I'll click Favorite, and then I'll go Keep. And I can do this on my phone as well. So I'll keep this one as well. I'll keep this one. Let's say I don't want to keep this one for some reason. So what I'll do is I'll just click discard. And then when I'm done, I will go to favorites. And if I feel like there's nothing in my Zettelkasten, I can copy some of these quotes into TK, and then I can write up my reaction. You don't have to use Readwise. You can use the Kindle app on your desktop, and you can just go through your notes and review them manually. And if you're using the actual Kindle itself, there is an option where you can export all of your notes from a particular book. It'll send them to email, then you can just drag them in here, or your version of in here, and then review them that way. So that's another way of getting ideas out from your books. Another potential option is to use a book summary service. So you can use Blinkist or Headway. Now, I'm not a huge user of book summary services. I prefer actually reading the books, but it can be useful if you've read a book, kind of forgotten about it, but you just want to get the bullet point summaries, and then you can bring them into your Zettelkasten, and then you can go back and extract a quote to support your argument. If you want to learn more about the Zettelkasten method, check out the book How to Take Smart Notes. So this goes through the process in a bit more detail and also has some key principles for the Zettelkasten method that are worth following. I also interviewed Sascha Fast. He's a German who is an expert in the Zettelkasten method. He's actually created software and courses that you can use on his website, zettelkasten.de. So you can find his interview on the Become a Writer Today podcast, or you can go to zettelkasten.de to learn all about his course in the Zettelkasten method and software that he offers. And to go back to software, another option that's potentially good is Obsidian. So Obsidian is an app that you can use for writing, but it'll also again generate interlinks between your notes. I did think about migrating to Obsidian, but I've got so many notes and entries in day one, it would take me quite a while to switch, so I haven't done that yet. You can also use apps or traditional note-taking apps like Evernote and Bear for your Zettelkasten too. And I haven't used those, at least for the Zettelkasten method, because all of my entries are in day one. Notion is another option for your Zettelkasten. You can use Notion for everything from project management to a personal knowledge management to collaborating with team members. Now, I can understand why a lot of people like Notion, but personally I found it a little bit cumbersome to interlink the notes in Notion. I found the blocks a bit confusing, but I know many writers love Notion and say it's quite easy to use. So that might be one for you to consider too. Ultimately, the tool is less important than having a process for your Zettelkasten. And the process comes down to engaging with your materials, summarizing in your own words, drawing seemingly unrelated connections between the different ideas, reviewing these connections regularly, updating your thinking on particular topics, and then finally turning the results into published work online and repeating that circle over and over. Having an imperfect system that you use is better than trying to create a perfect system that you'll never use. I hope you found this video helpful. If you do, hit thumbs up. And if you want to get more videos like this, please subscribe to the Become a Writer Today channel. Thanks for watching.